I'm 34, married for almost 7 years, and up until a few weeks ago, I would have said with full confidence that my marriage was solid. Not perfect, we've had our arguments, our slumps, our dry spells, but overall, we were in sync. Same goals, same routines, same bedtime shows. We knew each other's passwords, shared bank accounts, grocery lists, everything. Or so I thought. It started with something so ordinary it felt laughable in hindsight. My laptop wouldn't boot, and I needed to finish a work report. My husband, Nate, was already asleep on the couch, laptop open on the coffee table. I didn't think twice, I opened it, intending to use his Chrome browser and email myself the file. That's it. That's all I wanted. But then I saw it. A folder on his desktop labeled Home Repairs. And I swear to God, the only reason I clicked on it was because we've been planning to renovate our guest bathroom, and I thought, oh, maybe he saved some ideas. But it wasn't tile samples or plumbing invoices. Inside were dozens of subfolders. Each one had a woman's name. Some I recognized, coworkers, women from our neighborhood, even my cousin. Others were total strangers. And inside each folder were images, screenshots, videos, saved social media posts, personal information. Some of it was clearly public, but a lot of it wasn't. And one folder, one buried deeper than the rest, had my name. When I opened it, my whole body went cold. The folder with my name in it wasn't what I expected, not pictures of me or sweet memories, but recordings, audio files. At first, I thought maybe they were just voice memos. Nate does that sometimes when he's brainstorming ideas or needs to remember to buy dog food. But no. These were private conversations. My private conversations. Some were with him, arguments we'd had months ago, stuff I barely remembered saying. Others were not. Phone calls with my sister. A venting session I had with my best friend while we were walking around Target. Even a recorded therapy session, something I had done virtually when I was struggling with anxiety last year. That one I know I took alone, in our bedroom, behind a locked door. I don't know how he got it. I don't even want to guess. There were also screenshots of my texts. Entire message threads. Not just the normal stuff either, the most vulnerable, emotional texts I'd ever sent. Stuff I wouldn't even say out loud. He'd flagged them, color-coded them, added dates. It looked obsessive. It felt like spying. No, it was spying. And as I sat there, my hands shaking, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest, I noticed something else. A file titled backup_Ashley, saved just 3 days ago. Ashley is one of my closest friends. She lives 2 states away. We don't talk much in person, but we've had a long-standing group chat with a few other women since college. We vent, we joke, we share everything. I shouldn't have clicked it. But I did. Inside was a full download of her private Instagram archive, including photos I'd never seen before. Screenshots of her private stories. Comments from years back. A copy of her LinkedIn resume, saved as a PDF. And then, tucked at the bottom, a Word document. What she doesn't know. I opened it. And that's when things stopped feeling creepy. They started feeling dangerous. The Word document was only 2 pages long. But I swear, reading it felt like watching my marriage catch fire in slow motion. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't random notes. It was more like a script. It started with a summary of Ashley's emotional weaknesses, as Nate labeled it, her trust issues, her tendency to overshare after a glass of wine, how she responds to validation. Then it moved into predictions, how she'd react if certain scenarios played out. There were sections like if she visits again, compliment her career, and avoid discussing Sarah, me, unless prompted. She's already suspicious. It felt like he'd been preparing for something. Mapping out her behavior. Planning responses. At the end was a single sentence in bold. If she confesses first, pivot. Use empathy. Do not reciprocate until you've confirmed what she's willing to risk. I sat there frozen. Confesses what? Was he trying to manipulate her into admitting feelings for him? Did something already happen? I couldn't breathe. Ashley and I hadn't seen each other in person for months, but she'd visited last year, alone, just her, for a weekend. Nate was home the entire time. I had no reason to think anything weird had gone on between them, but now? Now I felt like I couldn't trust anything. And just as I started to shut everything down, I noticed something else. There were recordings in her folder too. One was labeled with a date that matched the night Ashley stayed here. Another one? Last Tuesday. That's when I realized Nate had labeled everything by dates he wasn't even supposed to be home. Which meant he'd been listening from somewhere. Recording conversations when people didn't know he was around. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. But all I could do was sit there, my hands still on the keyboard, the glow of the screen lighting up everything I didn't want to see. And then I heard something. Footsteps. The creak of the hallway floorboard, the one that only groans when you're trying to be quiet. He was awake. I shut the laptop so fast it made a sound, louder than I wanted. My heartbeat felt like it moved into my throat. The hallway creaked again. I told myself to stay calm. Just breathe. I hadn't technically done anything wrong. I'd borrowed his laptop. That's all. It wasn't snooping if what I found snooped on me first, right? Still, I grabbed my phone off the table like it was a lifeline and stood up slowly, quietly. I didn't know if I was going to confront him or just walk right past him and drive somewhere, anywhere, but I knew I couldn't just sit there pretending like I hadn't seen any of it. I stepped into the hallway. Nate was standing there. Just standing. Not saying anything. Not moving. He looked blank. Not surprised. Not angry. Just blank. His eyes flicked to the laptop in my hand, then back to my face. For a second, I thought he was going to smile. Like this was some kind of game to him. Instead, he said one word. Just one. You looked. Not a question. A statement. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My face probably told the whole story. I asked him the first thing that popped into my head. It wasn't even the most important thing, but it was the one my brain could grab onto. Why Ashley? He looked at me for a long moment, then shrugged. She was easy to read. That was it. She was easy to read. I wanted to slap him, cry, scream. But instead, I stood there stunned while he brushed past me and picked up his laptop off the coffee table like nothing had happened. I told him I wanted him to leave. Not forever. Just for the night. He said no. Said I was overreacting. That if I had questions, we could talk like adults in the morning. Then he turned, walked into our bedroom, and locked the door. Locked me out of my own damn room. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The small, black object near the TV. Tucked between a book and the speaker. It was a voice recorder, still blinking. He'd left it running. I stared at the blinking light like it was a bomb. Because in a way, it was. It meant this wasn't some old obsession he'd moved on from. He was still recording, still listening. In our home, while I thought we were healing. Laughing. Watching dumb shows on Netflix. He was documenting everything like a scientist studying a lab rat. I walked over and picked it up carefully, like it might bite me. It was one of those discreet, pen-sized recorders you could easily miss if you weren't looking. The display said it had been running for almost 2 hours. I didn't want to hear what it had caught. I already knew it included my voice, probably muttering to myself when I opened the folder. Probably every breath I took while reading what he'd written about Ashley. Maybe even the moment I whispered, "What the hell is this?" into the empty room. He'd probably listen to it later, analyzing the sound of my voice, my pacing, my tone, trying to figure out what I knew, what I felt, before I even got the chance to say it out loud. It was sick. I dropped the recorder into my purse and walked straight into the guest room. Locked the door behind me, sat on the edge of the bed, and just unraveled. The fear didn't hit until the adrenaline faded. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a porn addiction or a shady message thread. This was control. And it had been going on for God knows how long. I started replaying memories. Weird conversations where Nate seemed to know things I hadn't told him. Questions he asked that didn't make sense until now. My canceled therapy subscription, he said it was too expensive. My decision to stop journaling, he said it wasn't helping. The time he guilted me into quitting my job to work from home. He was isolating me. Quietly. Subtly. And I hadn't seen any of it. Until tonight. But the worst part? I didn't know if I was the only one. I barely slept that night. I laid there in the dark guest room, listening for every noise in the hallway, terrified that he'd come knocking, or worse, just walk in. But he didn't. No creaking floors. No text. No apology. Nothing. By morning, it was like nothing had happened. I heard him making coffee, humming like he always did, opening the fridge, pouring cereal. Just a regular morning in a regular marriage. Except now, I was locked in a room holding a voice recorder filled with evidence that my husband had been spying on me, and possibly others, for years. I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted proof. And I was done waiting for him to hand it to me. So while he left the house to run errands, I used the time to go back on the laptop. This time, I didn't hesitate. I wasn't afraid of invading his privacy anymore. He never gave me that courtesy. The folders went deeper than I thought. Ashley wasn't the only woman he was studying. There were at least 8 more folders labeled with names I recognized. Friends, acquaintances, co-workers, even my sister. Inside each folder were photos, some of them innocent, some definitely not. Some were selfies clearly taken from social media. Others? Taken at our house. I recognized the wallpaper, the lighting. These weren't screenshots. They were pictures he'd taken himself. One of my friend Lily, sitting on our patio, wearing a sundress and looking off to the side. She had no idea she was being photographed. Another of my sister, crouching to tie her shoe during a barbecue. Her shirt had ridden up slightly. I remembered that day. She joked about dropping mustard on her jeans. But Nate? He'd taken pictures. It felt like a punch to the gut. And then I found a password-protected folder labeled Red. The kind of label that's meaningless to anyone else, but not to me. Red is the name of the song that played on our first dance. It's what we named our dog, who died 2 years ago. It's what he calls me when he's drunk and sentimental. It was personal. I hesitated for a second, then typed in the password I knew he'd use, Red 2022. It opened. And what I found inside changed everything again. It wasn't pictures. It was emails, drafts, messages he never sent, written to someone I hadn't thought about in years. The emails were all unsent, sitting in a folder like little digital landmines waiting to be stepped on. Each one addressed to the same person, Camila. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, it's because I've never had a reason to say it out loud. Camila was Nate's ex, the one he was engaged to before me. He never talked about her much, said the relationship ended badly and he didn't want to dwell. From what little I knew, she moved overseas after their breakup and completely cut contact. I remember asking about her maybe twice in the early days of our relationship, and both times, Nate brushed it off. She's the past, he said. Not worth thinking about. Except apparently, she was. There were over 40 drafts. 40. Some were just a few lines. Others went on for paragraphs. Some were angry, others romantic. One of them read like a breakup letter. Another? Like a love confession. But all of them had one thing in common. They were written recently. The most recent one was just 4 weeks ago. It started with, I saw your photo again. I don't even know if it's really you, your smile's different now. But God, I wish you hadn't blocked me. Then it spiraled into something worse. I wish I hadn't picked Sarah. I don't say that out loud. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd waited just a little longer. If I'd fought harder. You haunted me for years, and you still do. I sat back, hand over my mouth, feeling like the air had gone out of the room. I'd spent the last 7 years married to a man who'd been writing love letters to a woman he claimed to be done with. A woman who had no idea I even existed, probably. And while I was raising our dog, folding his laundry, supporting his job changes and his weird emotional cycles, he was here, crafting letters to his ghost. I felt sick, betrayed in a completely new way. Not because he cheated, this was something different. It was emotional erosion. Quiet, steady, hidden. He had been mourning her the entire time he'd been building a life with me. But the worst part? One of the drafts ended with, I'll see you in December. Even if you don't want me to. Camila hadn't blocked him. He knew where she was. And he was planning to go. I backed away from the laptop like it burned me. December. It was August now. 4 months. Was he planning to leave? Was this whole twisted surveillance obsession just a distraction until he could reconnect with her in person? Was I just a placeholder? Suddenly, it all made sense, the way Nate had been extra agreeable lately. Cooking dinner more. Asking about my schedule like he cared again. Even saying he wanted to travel more next year. I thought maybe we were finally getting back on track. But no. He was preparing to leave me. My stomach dropped. And that's when something in me snapped. I was done pretending this was salvageable. This wasn't a rough patch. It was a total betrayal, spread out over years, disguised under routine and charm and shared toothpaste. I started taking screenshots of everything. I sent them to my own email. I copied the folder names. I even backed up the audio files I could find. And then I found something else. Another file, buried deep, one that hadn't been updated in months. It was labeled Exit. Inside were PDFs. A spreadsheet labeled budget_rebuild. Notes on splitting assets. A to-do list for canceling credit cards. An outline for separating shared bills. Even a rental application in his name, in another state. Colorado. That's where Camila moved. It was all there. A full exit strategy. As if I was just a project he was managing. A phase of his life he needed to close out. Neatly. Quietly. And I wouldn't have even known it was coming. The only thing that hadn't happened yet was the execution. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff I hadn't seen before, and now I was staring straight into it. That's when I heard his car pulling into the driveway. Nate was home. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might shake the windows. I slammed the laptop shut, yanked my phone and wallet off the table, and did the one thing I hadn't done since this started. I left. I didn't have a full plan, just keys in my hand and adrenaline in my veins. I got in the car and drove until I couldn't recognize the street signs anymore. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner off the highway, heart racing, mind spinning. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was still too full of rage. I thought about calling someone, my sister, maybe, or Lily, but the idea of saying it all out loud made it feel too real. So I sat there alone, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of the fact that my husband wasn't just unhappy, or distant, or even cheating. He was orchestrating an escape, recording me, planning to leave me while smiling to my face every morning. How do you come back from that? I opened my phone and pulled up the screenshots I'd sent myself. I wanted to make sure they were safe. But while scrolling, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of the email drafts in the red folder had an attachment. It was a photo. And when I opened it, my hands started shaking. It was me, asleep in our bed, hair spread across the pillow, mouth slightly open, clearly unaware the photo was being taken. The timestamp said it was from 3 nights ago. 3. I remembered that night. I'd gone to bed early with a headache. Nate said he was staying up to watch a documentary. I thought nothing of it. I never felt a camera. Never saw a flash. He'd taken the photo while I was unconscious and sent it, or meant to send it, to Camila. The draft message under it said, "You always said she looked peaceful. I wonder if you were just being kind." And that was it. No context, no explanation. I don't know what terrified me more, the fact that he was sending my sleeping image to a woman I'd never met, or the fact that he thought this was normal. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was violation. And I knew then, without a shred of doubt, what I had to do next. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a cheap hotel with buzzing fluorescent lights and a door that stuck when you closed it. I locked it anyway, twice, then shoved a chair under the handle just in case. I didn't sleep. Not really. I stared at the ceiling for hours, clutching my phone, replaying everything I'd seen, everything I'd missed for years. By morning, I'd made my decision. I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a woman my friend Lily recommended years ago when her own marriage had imploded. Discreet, strategic, relentless. I sent her the screenshots, the audio files, the photos, the documents from the exit folder. Everything. I held nothing back. She didn't hesitate. What I thought would take weeks to process started that day. While I was still wrapped in the same hoodie I'd worn the night before, my lawyer filed for divorce. She drafted an emergency motion to request temporary access to the house and recommended I stay somewhere Nate couldn't track. She even connected me with a digital security expert to sweep my devices for spyware, because honestly, at this point, I wouldn't put anything past him. It's been 6 days now. I haven't spoken to Nate, haven't seen him. I know he's trying, though. He's been calling, texting, sending emails with subject lines like "please talk" and "you don't understand." My lawyer advised I don't respond. And I won't. Because what's left to say? I wasn't just a wife to him, I was a project. A subject. A means to fill a hole he never stopped digging. And Camila? Maybe she'll see him in December. Maybe she won't. But either way, he won't be coming back to me. I've changed every password. Frozen our accounts. Moved my things into a storage unit under a name he doesn't know. I'm staying with Lily for now, she offered without hesitation. She doesn't ask questions. Just makes coffee strong enough to keep my hands from shaking and plays loud music when the silence gets too heavy. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wonder how long it would have gone on if I hadn't opened that folder. Would he have left in the night like he planned? Would I have woken up one morning to find the bed cold and a single note on the table? Or worse, would he have stayed? Pretending. Smiling. Watching. I don't know. But I do know this. He thought he was the one in control. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd never find out. But I did. And I walked away before he could finish the story he was writing about me. Now I get to write my own. And it starts here.